Hey, well, good morning and welcome to another daily devotional. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 21. 2 Samuel chapter 21. Quite an interesting chapter as to something that kind of unfolds as to something that happened in the past. So David is here and they're going through this season of a famine. And so David seeks God to understand why they are going through the famine, which I think is something very abnormal these days. Is when something is going on, we come up with a list of issues as to why that is happening. You know what I mean? Just to use an example, say someone gets sick, and then we'll say, okay, well, this person got cancer. Well, they probably got cancer because of this, or because of that, or because of this. This causes issues with it. That causes issues with it. Or maybe you get fired, and the boss doesn't tell you why you got fired, and so then you come up with this list of things. Well, it was because of this. It was because of that. It was because of this. It was because of that. And we come up with all of these reasons as to why something is happening. Without talking to God as to why it's happening. But David doesn't do that. David, they're in the midst of this famine, and it says right at the beginning, it says, so David sought the face of the Lord, saying, and then as he was seeking God, he said, God, what is it that is happening? Why is this going on? And if I was David, this would have come out of left field for me. I would have had all these other reasons as to why that it was happening. But this is literally what God says. It is on account of Saul, who at this point has been dead for years. It is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death. And it's kind of like, wait. This has to do with Saul and these people called the Gibeonites? What the heck is going on here? But it is something that God remembers through the ages of unrepented sin and unatoned for sin. He remembers all of these things through the ages. And there's this thing that happened previously that had not been made right. No one had repented of it. There had been no reconciliation. Nothing had happened. So God's wrath was getting poured out on the people. And the reason is because of this. And so, long story short as to what happened, Saul and the people of Israel had this deal basically with the Gibeonites that they would not harm them, that they would not do anything. But Saul defies that and kills some of them, then breaking the bond that they had, breaking the treaty that they had. So David says, well, I need to make this right. God's not happy with us. I need to make this right. Even though it wasn't, this is like kind of big to look at. It wasn't David's fault. David had no play in it. David did nothing. David had nothing to do with it. He still says, it doesn't matter if it was my fault or not. I'm going to work at making sure this situation is resolved. And how hard is that for us to do? Many times there's an issue going on and we put it on other people. Well, they need to figure this out. This isn't my problem. Other people need to figure it out. But when there's wrath being poured out in a situation, when God's justice is being poured out in a situation, and there's things not happening right, we all have to take responsibility for it and say, okay, God, what do you want us to do? God, what is it that I can do in this situation? So David says, God, what is it that I need to do right now in this situation? So God tells him to go and talk to them. So he goes to the Gibeonites to have this conversation with them. Kind of awkward. Hey, the last king killed some of your people, yada, yada, yada. I'm here to make this right. So he goes, talks to them to make it right. And basically what happens, so David says in verse 4, what do you want me to do? And they answered him, as for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us so that we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed and their bodies exposed for the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one. So basically, subtly what's happening here is they say, please give us 7 of his descendants, Saul's descendants, and they give those to him. And they say this line that says, and let their bodies be exposed. Because in that culture, the only time that somebody was killed and not buried was to bring shame upon them. So if you weren't buried or put into a tomb, if you were just laid out on the ground, your bones were just laid out, that was a way of saying that you are no longer of any value, that you're out there. But if you were executed, they would not do that because you died for a bad reason. So at this point, they said, we're going to kill these people and lay them out. He goes, okay, we'll do this. So he gives them these 7 sons of Saul, They go, they execute them, and all of these things happen. But at the end, David continues his involvement in the situation. David could have said, okay, God, I got the bad juju away, so to speak. Okay, God, everything's fine, and walked away from the situation. But he continues his involvement. He goes and even he collects the bones of the 7 sons of Saul to bring honor to Saul's family, to then bury them, to make sure that he's not only paying honor to God, he's also paying honor to the Gibeonites by this whole arrangement he did, but then he is still maintaining honor with the family of Saul by burying their bones. That in this situation, when it could be really awkward, we don't want to be involved in conflict resolution, we engage in conflict resolution as David did. We ask God what the conflict is, why we need to, and also we pay honor to everybody in the situation. David paid honor to the Gibeonites, he paid honor to Saul, and he paid honor to God in all of this. And so something just to remember, in all situations, if there's something going on, we need to remember, God, why is it that this is happening? And we need to do everything we can to make sure things between us and God are healed. So make sure to be with us tomorrow for 2 Samuel chapter 22. See you tomorrow.